Here at the Death by Tyranny podcast. I have to wait on my phone to charge now with this setup, and it's kind of aggravating. Not to mention, kids today with the phones constantly interrupting, and I can't really do anything about the background noise if someone were to call or anything like that. It would probably shut off the audio, and that's not great. So hopefully we have a couple of comments maybe to go off of because there's not much going on in the world today as far as news goes. I'm sure we might find out some stuff tomorrow. Something about the Biden administration fucking something else up. It would not be surprising. If it's not tomorrow, it will it will be the next day for sure. I'm still not used to the 3-minute countdown that I normally have, so it's hard to get things kind of organized and ready. Even after you hit go live, there's always something you forget to do. And with that 3 minutes, it kind of puts a buffer in between what's going on and what I forgot. But so with there not being any breaking news today as far as what the federal government or what they're letting us know as of now, I did want to touch up on something. I'm sure a lot of us have seen these IRS training videos going around. Supposedly they're leaked. I don't think they're leaked. I think that it is some type of a psyop campaign. I think that they have kind of tilted the scales when it comes to civilians and the way that they feel about the federal government too far, more than they thought it would tilt perhaps. So they are releasing these videos of the IRS agents kind of being knuckleheads and not really very threatening. And I think that was on purpose. For one, because what do we do when we're having a bad day or we get scared or anything like that? Your normal psychological go-to is usually humor. And I would imagine that they released these tapes of the IRS agents kind of being jackasses and just the worst cream of the crop that you could possibly get to kind of take away from some of the unnerving mood that they put the civilian status in the United States. But there is a few things you need to know about it. It's not just that these were leaked training videos in the IRS or of the IRS and what they're doing perhaps with some of this $78 billion. For one, I don't think the tapes were leaked at all. I think they are being recirculated in the online platforms, the more popular ones, in hopes that they went viral. And they knew they kind of would have because, like I said, we were looking for some humor in this to make us feel a little less uneasy than what we were previous. And so they weren't leaked. I don't believe that for 1 second. And I have my justifications why based on facts as well as just my how I feel about the situation. So obviously I don't think they're leaked. I think they were put out on purpose by the federal government to help us feel less uneasy. And here's the big one. The big one, and what I really want to get out there, because it's kind of misinformation about these videos, is none of these training videos are from 2020. To think that the federal government is even capable of passing a bill and then implementing on that bill so fast is very gracious of us, because they're a bunch of retards in the federal government and at the federal level. It's going to be years before they take full advantage of what Joe Biden just handed over. Or Kamala Harris, actually. If you really want to get to splitting hairs, she was the tie-breaking vote, so this would be on her, I guess. But the videotape is from 2017. So this is why I think that the federal government leaked this video, because the video isn't from now. It isn't based on any of the legislation that was passed in this, $78 billion to the IRS. This video is from 2017. So I believe that they put this out on the internet and tried to get it momentum to spread so that we kind of had something else other than to be just pissed off at the United States government. They said, hey, those really funny tapes we have of the retards down at the IRS training facility? Can we get those going viral? Because they're fucking pissed. And if we don't give them something to kind of chill them out a little bit, this could end up very bad for us. And they're absolutely right. Not only will it inevitably end up bad for them, it should. And another thing that I kind of picked up on, besides thinking that this is some kind of PSYOP campaign by using old videotape of training at the IRS facility, I also think they see exactly what I talked about in the last little short podcast I did. I told you that we needed to make it commonplace that normal civilians talk about we the people and the power that we hold and how easily and how often we should enforce this power to take control of our country. Whether that means showing up in brute force and intimidating the federal government into backing down off of their bullshit, removing politicians from office forcefully, and to be quite frank, to stand by our convictions when we say that we will punish tyrants to the fullest extent of our Constitution. So if we sit down as civilians and say we are going to make treason punishable by execution, we should stand by that. And once this is commonplace, that you, me, whoever, we're all at the table and we talk about taking our country back from the federal government is more common, the better off we will be. It won't be such a crazy thing to bring up. And the last one, I talked about how afraid people are to even say this kind of stuff out loud, even though it is the truth. It is what our country was founded upon, that we the people should hold the power. But ever since I have said this, and I'm not taking credit for it, because I honestly don't have the audience to have that kind of influence, even if I wanted to take credit for it. But it seems like I'm not the only one that feels this way, that this should be something that we can say out loud, that we can discuss amongst ourselves. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to get together and build a militia and go straight to the White House doors. No, but they should know that that is an option. And it should not be so shunned as it is today. And shortly after I made that, and maybe I just hadn't been noticing it the days prior, but it sure in the hell wasn't happening weeks prior, but maybe by a few days, all of a sudden you're starting to see memes and photos being shared around talking about what's a kind of lightly way to put this, putting down IRS agents when they show up at your front door. Now, I think even a week ago, if you would have posted some of these memes and some of these things on the internet talking about extinguishing IRS agents' lives, you would have gotten heavy pushback. Possibly even your shit taken down. And quite frankly, I am surprised that they have not started taking these things down. And I would almost be willing to bet that if this trend continues, where we see such a sustain for IRS agents and federal agents just encompassing all departments, that social media will then start censoring these photos and memes going around. And quite frankly, we cannot let this happen. It might not see or it might not seem as important as pushing back against the mask mandates. And on a psychological level, the mask mandates were very important to push back on. It was very easy to put a piece of cloth over your face to make other people feel comfortable, but all the psychological warfare that was involved there had to be fought against. You are trying to forcefully make civilians comply to your unjust demands while also brainwashing and tricking other just unknowing civilians into thinking that this is actually keeping them safe, which is doing multiple other things on multiple other levels. It is, like I said, trying to breed compliance into the American people. It is taking some of the responsibility off the federal government, because if people think that cloth mask is actually making people safe, the less the federal government has to do to protect those American people that they say they are protecting. So like I said, very, very important to push back on the mask mandates. But I believe that this is more important than that. We have to find a way, and if we don't find a way, there will never be a point where civilians are okay with violence and forceful removal of corrupt politicians. We have to run our own PSYOP campaign, which, in my opinion, isn't exactly a PSYOP campaign. It is righting a wrong. It is reversing the PSYOP that the federal government has done on the American people for so long. We have to find that way to make just your normal citizen understand that not only is it our right as civilians, but it is our duty as civilians to the United States to hold these politicians accountable, even up until the point where force and violence must take place. That should be our duty as people that actually care about the United States right now and wish to have a more peaceful resolution before it hits that escalation point. For every person that the federal government got to be duped by this mask mandate and this cloth piece hanging from their nose, we need to have just as many people understand that this is reality. Not the new normal, but the reality of what our forefathers intended this country to be. We the people is probably one of the most common, if not the most common, saying in the United States. That is for a reason. That is by design. It is not, it is just a saying now, but it was a way of life. It was a way of a free republic once upon a time. So how do we get that back into the mindset of American people? Make this what it was always meant to be, the ideology of being an American, not an extremist, not a violent right wing militia member, but an American. This is just the base, the starting level of what it is to be an American citizen, is to know that we the people hold the power far superior and above the federal government. So when things like this so-called leaked IRS video come out, the correct response, even before that, should have been, it doesn't matter what the federal government does with the $78 billion it's giving to the IRS, because as soon as they begin to abuse the power that we have given the elected officials, they will be terminated. They will be removed from their seats of power. They will be removed from their jobly duties. No problem. And this would do so much for the mindset of just your everyday middle class person in the United States. You wouldn't wake up every day fearing that you make a mistake on your Cash App and fear that you might be audited by the IRS in the coming months. But quite the opposite. You should wake up knowing that if you were to make a mistake on your Cash App, well, sure, the IRS might have a duty to uphold to audit you, but there should not be any fearful or hugely impactful penalty to that. And not only that, but you should have a reasonable amount of time to correct this mistake. And the federal government should know that its hands are tied, that they must allow you to try to fix this mistake on your timeline by any means that doesn't seek to disrupt your everyday life, so you can then go on to become a productive member or keep being a productive member of society so the system can keep running. That is ultimately the downfall of this what is it, socialist democracy or socialist democrat, this Bernie Sanders type of ideology. The number one fault in that is if you make these people's lives so hard to be able to execute, you're going to start throwing wrenches in the gears. Shit will start to slow down. And this works from a very small scale to a very large scale. It still has the same impact on any organization, let alone a fucking government. If you make it to where the citizens cannot properly and easily be able to contribute to the system will slow down and fail. This is why our military, up until, the diversity and inclusion bullshit started happening, this is why our military was one of the strongest, if not the strongest fighting force in the world to have ever existed. It's not because it was the army of the US. No, it was because it was a voluntary military. That way you only have the highest of moral compassed people joining your military. You're not forcing anybody and everyone to join. Only the people that are willing and happy to join your military are going to show up. This is ultimately going to have a better end result. This is why they make the things and the training to be promoted in the military so hard. Because if you are able and willing to try out for some of the most difficult positions in our military, and you voluntarily show up every single day, and have it in the back of your mind that you can quit at any given moment, the end result is going to be phenomenal and going to be far superior than a military where you make every 16-year-old join. And this is what it would be like if we had this on a federal government level of participating and being a civilian in the United States. Not only, and this is quite frankly, whether you want to believe it or not, why our politicians are getting shittier. Because there is no standard anymore to the voters. We tell people that everyone has to vote. And we know that this is part of our civil duty to vote as American citizens, so a lot of us show up and do it. And it's good that it's voluntary, but there's no standard there. We should have a standard in our voting process that you have to work up to, but also be voluntary. Then you would get better people with a higher calling to their politicians, instead of just people showing up and voting for whoever made them feel good inside. It's just, I think there is a lot of psychological shit going on in the United States that is leading and has led us to the point that we are at, that no one takes into account. And more so this leftist cult that has arose within the last 10 years, where they are just they have no standards, so they allow anyone and everyone in, and because of that, the people that are in there wish to pour or push their moral compass onto other people, which would be okay. I'm not totally 100% against that, to try to push people towards a better moral compass, but that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is pushing them towards their moral compass, which under their umbrella of ideology is including child molestation and no penalty for breaking the law, no vetted process to legal immigration. But I'm kind of getting off track here with all this. It's just to say we have to try to convince this population that has been so mind-fucked into believing the federal government is their only hope, and to slowly backpedal them back in to actually being a productive member of society. We have to get them to understand that the federal government doesn't hold the power. We hold the power. And because we hold the power, we have a moral obligation to keep this show running for the generations after. It doesn't matter if you believe in God or a life thereafter, because you're working to preserve something that will continue to run on this earth, the living here now, to forever be able to be enjoyed by the generations to come. So if you say, I don't believe in God, I have no moral compass, yada, 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 I can do whatever I want as long as it makes my genitalia feel good. Once I die, that's it. It's over. Well, it's a little bit harder to, than that. Because now you have to ask yourself, are you okay with leaving a cesspool for your children that you've left behind on this earth? Are you okay with leaving the cesspool to rot and to continue to rot for friends and family that will be here after your life has expired? Quite frankly, being a good citizen in the United States has nothing to do with who you believe in or what religion you take part in. It has more so to do with what you're leaving and what you're contributing to the people that have to live here now. And the federal government is far too incompetent to be able to keep this going for years, much less lifetimes, generations. So and it works both ways. It's not just to make them understand that they hold the power, so they hold the responsibility to keep this country afloat and running, and be a functional, high, uh, polite society. Not only that, but at any time that the federal government oversteps, we should be able to swiftly push them back into their place. But where we are at in society is that the government has encompassed all of the responsibility that I just listed. So this is why you have gang members in cities and youths that grow up with no purpose or direction. We could have easily given them that purpose. Be a good fucking productive member of society for the generations after, for the people who have to live here besides yourself. And instead of that, we say, hey, if you don't want to worry about it, that's cool. The federal government will take care of it. If you can't afford it, hey, that's cool. The federal government will take care of it for us. That's where we're at. So every day that you are trying to bring people over into our side, people who actually believe that this idea of a free republic is the best form of government, we can start converting these people back. Because right now, they don't believe in a free republic. They believe in a socialist democracy, which is a very, not a very high standard of democracy. I was hoping for that to kind of spark off a little bit of conversation. And I think I might have got on here a little bit too late for that to have happened. But just as so long as we start to understand that this idea that we should be prepared, that it is our civil duty to be able to, at any given time, forcefully remove these corrupt politicians from government. It's not just to fill our egos. It's not just to spark a civil war. It's actually the complete opposite. It is there to humble us so that we know that we have the responsibility, that we can't just wake up every day and do what we want. And I also believe that this is kind of where this libertarian mindset can be misplaced, misguided. That's the word I'm looking for, misguided. This is where I think libertarians are misguided. This idea that I just want to be left alone and I should be allowed to do whatever I want. There's some hiccups in that ideology. If we just are left alone to be able to do whatever we want, who maintains this? Where does that ideology hold you responsible to maintaining this land, this freedom? You just want to roll the dice that there will be someone that is able-bodied and willing to do it for you, well, now we're back where we began, where you are depending on someone else to maintain the standards and upkeep the land. We might as well just have what we have now. So we're not any better or worse than we were prior to getting rid of all the corrupt politicians. And quite frankly, I don't care if it is Republicans that lead us into this new America First, polite, high standard society that we once had. I don't give a fuck who leads us there. It just seems to be that there are more Republicans that are willing to step up to the plate. So unless the Libertarian Party is willing to come to the table and kind of shift some of their lingo and beliefs around, I don't necessarily know that a new libertarian savior will emerge from the shadows. It seems to be that all the Democrat politicians and leaders have gone the way of the dodo for this new socialist Democrat Party. And then we have the Republicans, where most of the conservatives fall under. And even they are, for the most part, corrupt. So I think one of the big things that we're going to be looking for in this, one of this newcomers to come and kind of get the ball rolling, because this is going to be a change in culture. It's going to be a change in ideologies amongst normal Americans. So it's probably going to take something much bigger than a single podcast, unless it's something, like a Joe Rogan. We're going to have a politician emerge from the ashes that is more than likely conservative with a high moral compass. And I say conservative because most of the people that I hear talk about politics and at least understand it the way that I understand it claim to be conservative. They will discard the title Republican and replace Republican, in its place they will put conservative. And that's what I kind of tend to do as well, because there are things that are wrong with the Republican Party that I wish to replace while maintaining a conservative mindset and moral compass. And hopefully one of these people emerges in the very near future, because I'm not asking for one to be elected. I'm just asking for one to be emerged and be in the spotlight to kind of push this idea that the people hold the power. That at any time this Green New Deal disguised as a Inflation Reduction Act can be dismantled. In no planet, in no world, should we be forced to deal with a bad decision like the Inflation Reduction Bill. The second that it starts having negative consequences for the American people, we should be able to take that off the table. And we should be able to do this with everything. If they say, hey, we're going to do mail-in ballots, and then we have some type of a disaster like in 2020, then that should be able to be wiped off the table by the American people. That should not have to go through any big decision-making process. It's just, hey, This doesn't work. It seems to be affecting Americans to the point where we are starting to take notice. This needs to be reevaluated. Not, well, there's 8 more years that we have to implement this practice because that's what the bill originally said. And I know there are ways to amend, shit and change bills, but we have an incompetent Congress and an incompetent government. We have to start taking some of this responsibility back onto ourselves. And we have to get people talking about that. We have to get people to understand that, hey, we should be in charge of the ship. We have representatives to take care of the everyday things that civilians don't have time for. Well, in the same sense, they don't hold all the responsibility for those things. And if we decide what they're doing is wrong, we will remove them. It's that simple. Now, it's not going to be that simple to implement and to practice now because of how much power the federal government holds, and that's really what we're talking about here, I guess. We're talking about not convincing people that we the people have the power and that it should be that way, but that the cost is the cost is minimal to have that versus what's actually going on today. Because a lot of the pushback you're going to get is, well, if we try to implement something like that, it's going to be devastating. The federal government's going to have a lot of pushback, even violent, pushback. And is it really worth changing to that extent? Yes, absolutely it is. And it's not really changing. It's putting it back the way that it was meant to be. And we have sent people to their death overseas for far less than to keep things the way they were meant to be here at home. If we can send all of these voluntary war fighters over to seas to die for oil and for bullshit politicians, then we ourselves should have no problem seeing that we are obligated to give our lives if necessary to maintain and to keep the freedom here at the homeland. But since we don't have anybody participating in tonight's podcast, I think I'm going to get off here. It is a little bit later than I decided to get on via some technical difficulties. And this shit sucks the life out of my phone. So even if I decided to go a little bit longer, my phone would die. We're at the 40-minute mark. And because it's so light, I'm kind of walking all over the ideas I'm trying to get across. But for this to do anything, I can't just stop. I got to keep going and keep putting them out, and maybe one day we'll get there. All right, so I appreciate all you guys liking, sharing, following, doing whatever it is that the 2 or 3 people that actually listen do. You guys stay safe, stay prepared. God bless America first.